Have a great night. A set of paranormal situations that happened in grandmother's old house, in a town in the north of the country when she was still alive. What I can assure you is that these events are 100% real, since there are several witnesses. I remember the events as if it had been yesterday. The back door of the house completely open, and that black gate that always made a gloomy noise when it opened, and even more so when it was at night. I remember like while I was trying to sleep since I was a little sick. My cousins played in front of the house and ran around it. I will never forget that clear sound. The truth is that I was already a little scared and perhaps suggestive. The patio of my grandmother's house that turned into a dense darkness due to the trees. I remember that kind of gasping that seemed to come from someone with trouble breathing. I could feel it warm, deep, and very close to me, bothered by that sound so close to me. I threw a punch thinking that I would be able to stop one of my cousins, who were surely playing a joke on me. But I was really surprised when I did so, I didn't touch anything. Only air, I was completely alone. I went toward the kitchen where I would surely find my mother. And she could be sure. Thank God we wouldn't spend the night at Grandma's house. It was undoubtedly something very disturbing, and even more so because I didn't know anything about the previous strange events that house housed. Over the years, I noticed how those types of events happened. Were repeated more and more. I told my mother about those events. She told me that it was nothing, just common noises, because old houses tend to generate those sounds. A couple of years before I experienced something similar again, I would have been around 14 years old when I had to take care of myself. Grandmother, one night we were in her bedroom that led to the dining room, divided by a door, and her bed was close to it. I actually used a sponge mattress to sleep on the floor and be aware of what was offered because my grandmother was not very well. Health and required special care. It was around 1 a.m. In the town, the street was completely silent without the noise of cars or animals. Suddenly, I began to hear the noise of chains being dragged through the kitchen. I got scared very much immediately, and I told my grandmother, listen to that noise. She responded no again. She was used to the noise, and with great fear, I just listened to what the grandmother said and decided to sleep. The sound stopped, and the next morning I mentioned it to some of my cousins, who sometimes also stayed with my grandmother. I told them what had happened to me. 2 of them told me, don't worry, ignore them. Try to ignore the noises. This is not every day. And well, my surprise was realizing that this type of phenomenon was not new. Rather, it was something completely recurrent in that house. And I began to investigate with more members of my mother's family. My uncles knew about these phenomena. It turns out that not only did it happen to my cousins when they heard the sounds of the chains, but even my uncles had to see a woman floating without them. His feet could be seen in the patio of the house. Between the thickness of the trees, since my grandmother's yard was immense because it even had a garden. When I talked about this again with my mother, she told me that she didn't want to scare me, which is why she hadn't told me the truth. She had told him on several occasions. I have had to be disturbed while I was in the bathroom by strange sounds like someone complaining, and that on one occasion the old stove that my grandmother still had was turned on with all the flames at maximum power. Something that might sound ridiculous, but it should be noted that this was a very, very old stove, and sometimes it was simply impossible to turn it on, since the burners failed or one was no longer useful. On that occasion, the 6 of them completely turned on, while my aunts and my mother were talking about their experiences in that house, surprised. They began to pray and ask for God's protection, because in my family, the vast majority are Christians. It teaches us as children to rebuke any spirit so that it does not bother us. Other events that made me more clear about the supernatural things that I experienced in my grandmother's house. But what was more disturbing was when it was my turn to see that woman. I was around 15. Years ago, when I entered the room of one of my uncles who was only 5 years older than me, and I went in to ask him about some things he was looking for. I was surprised when I entered, I saw my uncle turning towards the other door that led to the dining room, completely frozen, pale as if they would have scared him away or something like that. He told me, you don't see her too, which I answered, who? And my uncle answered, the lady. There she is. At that moment, I turned towards the wall where the kitchen door was, and I saw a woman enter, an old woman floating. She had no feet and seemed to have a kind of hump. She never turned to see us. She just walked to the bathroom and there she completely disappeared. Seeing this, my uncle and I ran out as fast as we could. It was night. That same night we couldn't sleep or even talk. My uncle got a strong fever. I imagine that because of the fright. The truth is, I was only speechless for a couple of hours. It was the worst thing that has happened to me in my life regarding the supernatural. The next day we talked about this event more calmly with some of the uncles who, without surprise, only responded that they had also had similar experiences with this old woman, but that she seemed to be taking care of something in that part of the house specifically. After this, I never saw it again. My uncles thought it was a treasure, legends of old towns. Although they tried to find said treasure by digging in different parts of grandmother's yard, they never found anything, even using metal detectors. When the grandmother died, the house was left alone because no one wanted to stay and live in it. They did not want to live with whatever was in that house. It deteriorated to the point of the roof falling in. A couple of years ago, a cousin decided to buy it from my uncles. He completely cleaned the place to build a vacation house. To this day, my cousin has not mentioned anything about ghosts or paranormal things, simply as if nothing had ever happened. This is my story. I hope I can hear it in one of his videos, and as I told you this, I lived it. Greetings and good night, friends.